Today I'm going to talk to you about sound and vibration and how it relates to sound. If it weren't for the air around us, we would not really be able to hear anything at all. Science fiction movies that have explosions in outer space aren't really telling the truth, because without an atmosphere, without oxygen and air, we would not have any sound at all because of the way sound works. Sound is really a vibration of a particular object. In the case of my voice speaking to you, the vibration comes from vocal cords inside our necks. Air is forced through those vocal cords. They vibrate. Shapes from the mouth determine what words and sounds come out of the mouth and throat. And you're able to then understand, if you speak that same language, how a person is communicating to you. In fact, you're hearing it because the vibrations that are caused by sound waves in the air are now going, those sound waves are now going into the space of your ear, to where there is a tiny little thin membrane or a thin little tiny piece of tissue that is called an eardrum. When that eardrum feels the pressure of the sound wave, it sends electrical impulses to your brain that you understand as sound. Once again, no air and no air pressure, no sound. Without vibration, there's also no sound to move that air in sound waves. Well, now we all know that we can't see the air around us, but we can see the vibration of different objects. A rapid moving back and forth, the fancy term for it is oscillation, but a rapid moving back and forth of an object, if it's attached to something that will then resonate or ring with it, we are able to hear that sound wave push those sound waves into our ear so that we can recognize these as tones. Stringed instruments are something that we can look at and notice how the vibration is by watching it rapidly go back and forth. I'm going to demonstrate that on a small harp using one of the longer strings to show you what it sounds like. So you can see the vibration of a longer string. If I play the very same types of notes, but on thinner strings, they're much harder to see as they vibrate, but they're moving so rapidly. Once again, that oscillation is even more rapid on a short string, so the sound actually becomes higher. So in summing up vibration, you just have to remember that any rapid back and forth motion of an object can sometimes create a sound wave pushing air that actually is picked up by the eardrum, and it's something that we can then detect as a sound. Now, another important part of sound, especially musical sound, is a word that we use called pitch. Pitch refers to a note, whether it's what's called a high note or a low note. Now, what a high note or a low note is really depends on the instrument that you're playing. I'm playing a style of Native American flute that I make, and the flute itself is limited to how many notes I can play. My very low note on this flute is when all the fingers are covered on all the holes. If I try to play one of the higher notes, I have to remove some of those holes to let the air escape. A bass guitar is part of the family that would be in the range of the lower sounding instruments. I'm going to illustrate pitch by taking a real simple little tube. This is a little piece of sprinkler pipe that you might see in the front yard. It's called PVC, or polyvinyl chloride pipe, and it's a real thin wall. And I put a cap on the end of some wood, and as you can see, I drilled a hole at one end about 1/2 inch away from the top where I sealed it off. And you can play a tone from this by blowing across. And that's the sound that you can get out of this length of the pipe. But to illustrate pitch, I'm going to shorten this pipe, not by cutting pieces off, but by putting holes in it at certain places. And I'll show you how that works. So now the 6 holes were drilled onto the tube. And if I blow across the tube and don't cover any of the holes, then the hole closest to the end here would be where all the air escapes, and because it's a real short distance, it plays a high pitch. But if I cover each one of the holes, I'll get back to the original sound, or original pitch, of the length of the tube. Now as I uncover each finger, I get a set of notes, sometimes called a scale, that in this case turns out to be with a major scale that people are familiar with. So simple songs can be played with combinations of fingers and releasing the air. Every time all the holes are covered, you get the full length or the low pitch. By lifting fingers up, the air escapes sooner, the distance that the air has to travel is shorter, and it becomes a higher pitch. And that's really the basis behind all wind instruments. Stringed instruments have to do with tension, making the higher tension in a string make a higher pitch. So pitch is really just the ups and downs, the highs and lows of music. The next component of sound that I'll speak about has to do with volume. Volume relates to the amount of sound that you hear. Now every sound has a particular volume. Very small sound might be the ticking of a clock. Loud sounds could be electrical tools, or the types of machine sounds that we sometimes hear, snow blowers, things like that, make a lot of noise. But the word for the noise, whether it's loud or soft, is volume. For instance, my speaking voice is something that can be heard comfortably by the people that are listening right now. But if I add a microphone to it, I've amplified my voice, giving it more carrying power. And if it's too loud, it can be a real surprise for the person next to me who has to stand by that amplifier. So volume, when you speak about volume, we're really talking about how loud something is, how soft something is, and how that relates to what you're playing. You might hear somebody say, turn it down. And if what you're listening to is too loud, that's a volume that you might like, but might not be the volume that someone else next to you is enjoying.